this is something that we all followed from afar, like it was a movie, like it was a novel written by somebody. We're used to reading these stories and seeing them on the big screen, not seeing it happen in real life. And you were front and centre of this story. You've tried to go back to work 3 times. You're still struggling to overcome the effects of what happened to you. What have the last few years been like?
Yeah, morning. It's been really tough. The last couple of years have been, certainly for the first year, was a bit of a whirlwind. There was so much going on. It was very fast paced. And over the last year or so, where it's obviously died down and it's gone out of the media. I've been left, and certainly my family have been left, to kind of pick up the pieces of me and of the family and try to move on. It's been really, really tough. And I'm not embarrassed to say that I've suffered with depression, and I'm still kind of trying to sort myself out and climb out of the hole that I felt like I've been in. But I also feel very, very lucky. Obviously, Dawn tragically passed away because of it, and so I do feel, at the same time as feeling the way I do, feel very lucky to be here today.
It's the sort of, I imagine, the mental torture that you've been put through because of what happened to you in such bizarre, extreme circumstances that you've really struggled to come to terms with, that how that happened to you. Physically, what was the impact of the Novichok that you ingested?
Physically, it's quite difficult to compare or contrast the two different things. So the Novichok itself, there were fairly acute symptoms quite early on, but I had a slower, obviously it affected me in a slower rate, certainly than it did with the Scripples. I had tiny like pinprick eyes. I was sweating, and that kind of evolved over a couple of days, to the point where I was then vomiting. It sounds foolish. I put that down to exhaustion and maybe a migraine, because obviously at that time we had no idea what we were dealing with, and you couldn't even begin to comprehend that it could have been something like a nerve agent. And it just evolved from there, really. But the drugs that I was put on in hospital, they obviously had their side effects as well, and it's quite difficult to kind of differentiate between the Novichok and the drugs that I was on. But I had hallucinations and say vomiting, and it was terrifying. It was very stressful time.
And Tracy, you then had to deal with an invisible threat that was affecting your local community. We didn't know who was going to be infected next. You didn't know. Nobody really knew what the effects of Novichok were going to be, although there'd been a death. It's not dissimilar in a way to dealing with this pandemic for the whole country. You had to bring Salisbury into a lockdown. What did you learn from that time? Firstly, about yourself and, in a way, your ability to rise to this extraordinary challenge, which we'll see in the drama, but also just about how to nurture a community during such extreme fear.
It was an extraordinary time, professionally and personally. I think the first thing to recognise is, obviously, I didn't work on this alone. I was part of a magnificent team of professionals who responded quickly, and we worked through expert scientific knowledge and shared that information. So it was always part of a very cohesive and thoughtful process in terms of the way we dealt with this and the decisions that were made. Brilliant leadership, both locally, regionally and nationally. But as you get into the personal impacts, and Nick's story is a profound one, as are so many, and people across the community were affected in a whole range of ways. And you're absolutely right to say that that impact is still felt. We had a lot of businesses affected, and we had a church closed down with the second incident. So these huge community centres and hubs were hugely affected. But on an individual basis, people that were affected by cordons that couldn't get in and out of their homes without showing ID. So the impact on people's just their liberty, in a way, was extraordinary.
And Nick, it was interesting for me to read that when you did come back from hospital, you couldn't go back to your home all your children's toys had to be destroyed, your car had to be destroyed. Just explain that. I mean, I wonder whether part of the trauma is the fact that the fear that it could have spread to your family and there was nothing you could do to protect them at that point.
Yeah, it was a scary time. The trauma itself didn't necessarily come from my policing actions on the night that I started to deal with it. I mean, we went into the Skripal's house and to have a look, and in fairly normal police investigatory ways. That wasn't the trauma, because obviously we didn't know what we were walking into, and we didn't realise what had happened until 2 or 3 days after. But the trauma came from the days and the weeks after that, with the obviously the public interest, and it became international, and the political ramifications of it. But yes, the family were massively affected by what had happened, and we weren't able to go home. The last time I was at our old house was on the Tuesday morning when I went into hospital, and that's the last time I went back there. But we were very open with the kids, and my wife did an amazing job with the kids. She was very open and honest, and kept them in the loop as to what was going on. And it was difficult because we had to explain to them that we weren't able to go back to the house, but we said to them, we'll find a new house and fill the new house with your things, and it will feel like home again. And then only a couple of weeks after that were we then telling them, we can't do that, because everything that we have in our house, all of your possessions, all of your books, toys, clothes, they have to be destroyed. So we have to start again. So it was quite tough.
So what, and Nick, I know that your parents weren't best pleased initially when the drama was muted and the BBC started making this, because, of course, they've lived with you going through this extraordinary emotional trauma. But I wonder now how you feel about us getting to see a BBC drama of what happened to you. And I know you've met Rafe Spall, who's playing you in the drama. Are you looking forward to seeing it? Are you looking forward to the fact that we will get a better understanding of what you and your colleagues and Salisbury went through?
Yeah, I think so just to go back to the point about my parents, that they weren't happy, but that was around the way that they found out about the drama. They heard it in the press, and it was back last year, so it was still very raw. It'd only been 12 months or so since it happened, and it was still quite raw for them. But they found out through the press that this was happening, and I think their kind of reaction to it was more to protect me and the family, because we didn't know that it was happening. When we then met with the writer, one of the writers, Declan Lawn, and we chatted through and understood their vision for the drama, that's when we started to understand. And the vision really was about the human aspect. I think with a story as huge as this was at the time, and around the investigation and the political, like I said, the political ramifications, the human aspect can sometimes get lost in translation with that. And the drama really was around the people, about normal people going about their normal lives and getting caught up in this huge incident. And it's important, certainly important for me to have the drama, and I think the production team of the drama done a brilliant job of representing the normal people that were caught up in it.
Will you be watching, Tracy?
Yes, I'll be watching.
And are you looking forward to seeing it as well?
It's hard to say looking forward. I agree with everything Nick said. The way the writers and the producers have approached it has been incredibly sensitive, and they've been very thorough and considerate of the people that they're portraying, and the processes that they're portraying. I think it's a good drama, and one that will be, I think, welcome at this time, because what it does show is the way professional bodies come together, but also the magnificent cohesion across communities, and that was something that happened so brilliantly during this time, and the way systems support people that are obviously affected in a tragic way, like the Sturgis family with the loss of Dawn. So I hope people enjoy the drama for what it is and the positive story that it is telling.